Here on KCTV 5 Plus, we are taking you behind the story. If you're driving in Missouri, you've probably seen people using their phones behind the wheel. And there is a law to stop this, but it is harder to enforce than you might think. And we have our investigative reporter, Samantha Boring, here with us today to talk all about this issue as you have done this investigation recently and got to talk to law enforcement. I know you went on a ride along.
Yep.
So really quickly, without giving too much away, how was that?
The ride along was definitely not what I expected. I felt like we were going to see a lot more people on their phones. We did eventually, but it took a while. And I think it's mostly because we were in a marked vehicle and people were like, oh, I got to be on my best behavior. So it took a little bit to actually see people breaking this law. But it was very interesting to see how the challenges and how that works for law enforcement when it comes to actually enforcing this new law. And you'll see that here in this story.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see as, you know, I'll look over to my right or someone's in front of me at the stoplight and it's like, okay, let's go. And you can pick up that they're probably on their phone. So, yeah, this is going to be really intriguing. So without further ado, let's go ahead and play the story and see how the ride along went.
Actively using his phone. 524 some rolling check.
We rode along with Missouri Highway Patrol Corporal Justin Ewing. It didn't take long to spot someone breaking the law.
Any reason you were using your phone while you were driving?
This driver telling Ewing he owns a company and was texting his employee.
A lot of it's working professionals. They're trying to do business, send emails, text messages.
In Missouri, it is illegal to be physically using your cell phone while driving. Instead, you can make or receive phone calls with Bluetooth or speakerphone, aka hands-free. This took effect in 2025.
It's something that we're all guilty of at times. Distractions, very easy to do, unfortunately, in the culture and the world we live in.
A moment's distraction that can change everything. Something Eucliffus Kearney feels needs to stop.
Other people's lives are in danger when you do that. You know, if you're looking down and you texting and you driving and a car stops in front of you and you run in the back of that car, well, you just messed up two cars.
But chances are not all are caught. Here's what we found. 2025 data shows Troop A, that includes Jackson County, had 256 hands-free citations this past year. Over in Troop C, which covers St. Louis, it had 457 tickets in 2025.
They low numbers compared to the drivers that's not paying attention to the roads and they got their phone. You know, that's dangerous.
Troopers face a big challenge. Even when they see someone on their phone, they can't pull them over. Here's why. State law says troopers can't stop you for just using your phone. They have to have a primary violation. These can be speeding, lane violations, or expired tags. Hands-free is a secondary violation similar to the seatbelt law. You can't be pulled over for only that. Remember this driver from earlier in the story? He was first seen texting and driving, but it took a minute before Ewing could pull him over.
I ran the tag, find it's expired. Okay, now I've got the reason to stop him and I can enforce that hands-free violation.
He faced a ticket. The first fine cost $150. He's only one of a few drivers who end up being held accountable.
It's often discouraging when we see that person doing something we know could potentially cause serious injuries, or even in Missouri, we know it causes fatalities every year.
So how can state troopers better enforce this?
So lane change with no turn signal.
Ewing says if hands-free became a primary violation, it would be easier for law enforcement to act.
I would anticipate those numbers would hopefully go up over the coming years as officers gain better strategies of facing those challenges of it being a secondary violation.
But if these stay secondary, Ewing says it's about educating drivers and hearing the stories that prompted this law.
Are you aware that Missouri is a hands-free law state?
Missouri passed this law to save lives, but because of how it's written, it's difficult to enforce. Unless that changes, your safety depends on drivers making the right choice.
Think to yourself, would I want to be hit by someone distracted on their phone, and try to make those better choices for yourself as a result.
I reached out to Kansas City, Lee Summit, and Independence Police Departments. All three say they can't enforce the hands-free law because it's a state law and it blocks cities from creating their own ordinances. That mainly leaves up enforcement to troopers who, again, can't pull you over unless you're breaking another law first. In Kansas City, Samantha Boring, KCTV 5 investigates.
Okay, so my first question watching this was really intriguing. I took some notes. How is something a state law, but they can't enforce it?
I know.
That blows my mind.
When I started this story, I was like, oh, I'm just going to get the numbers and see how this law actually was working for the first full year of citations, because it's been in effect since 2023, but they couldn't write citations until 2025. And when I saw those numbers, I was like, this is it? 256, 457 for areas that are massive.
Yeah.
And like you said, I mean, we've all fallen guilty to it. We see it all the time, people on their phones. There are specifics about when it is and is not okay to be on your phone while driving in this law. But primarily, you're not supposed to be on it, at least physically holding it in your hand. So to know that it's a secondary violation instead of a primary violation, like, I had no idea. I'm sure a lot of other people didn't know. And it's the same way, like I said, with the seatbelt violation. And it's crazy because it's like he said, it's something that can cause fatalities.
That blows my mind too. Because I mean, all my life I've known, like, wear your seatbelt, or if, especially, you know, if the cops are around, you need to have your seatbelt on or they can pull you over. But I guess, you know, it's a case by case basis depending on where you live. But that is something. I mean, and even with the Jeep that you all were following, saw the person on their phone and had to kind of ride a while, and it turned out that their license plates were expired. But if they weren't, then what?
Yeah, he would have just gotten away with it unless we could find something that he did wrong. I know the other person that was pulled over, she was speeding, and so she was pulled over for speeding, but also the violation. We didn't have her full story in the ride-along just because she didn't end up getting a ticket. But what they primarily do in those cases, if say they didn't know about the law, or say that they weren't technically breaking it, like, one way that you would think people might be breaking it is, like, if your phone is actually on the dash and say you're doing maps or music, the law specifically says, like, that you can be accessing those, but you're not supposed to be holding the phone. So, like, that woman, she was holding her phone using maps, and so he was like, you know, there's kind of like a leeway almost, like, well, I could give her a ticket, but she doesn't totally know about this law, so he ended up using it as a chance to educate her about how the law works, what she should do, and what she shouldn't do, and then she went on her way. But that's not every case. The guys that he gave a ticket to, I mean, we know he was texting and driving, and it's unfortunate, but it is mostly working professionals, because it's so hard for so many of us to just put our phones down and be like, okay, I'll get to my work when I get to work. Yeah. But some people, it's really hard for them.
And I was relieved when the trooper said, you know, we're all guilty of it, because I'm like, let me not incriminate myself here.
Hey, I've done it. I'm sure you've done it. Like, it's very normal.
Yeah, but I mean, I've also had those moments too where I'm, you know, looking at my phone if I'm changing a song or something, and I look up real quick and I have to, like, tap on my brakes because I was about to run into the back of someone. It's scary.
It is scary. And it's nice with, like, the newer cars that have, like, the maps right there. You don't really have to worry about it. That's how my car is. But I know when I drove a 2007 Mazda, that was not the case. And so it was a lot harder to keep track of my navigation, those kinds of things. But that's why they want you, if you don't have those, to find a way to prop up your phone, get one of those phone mounts, which can help you avoid violating the hands-free law. But really, we were also told that local police departments, I reached out to a lot of them, and they don't have any numbers on these because they're not enforcing this. They were told that the law blocks cities from creating their own ordinance to enforce this. So mainly what we're seeing is state troopers are enforcing this. I did hear from, I believe it was Jackson County Sheriff's Department. They had enforced a couple of the tickets, but really it's mainly up to MSHP.
And what's interesting about that, at least for me, is I don't really see state troopers out.
Yeah, I don't either.
Much. I see city police more than anything.
Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing. I think he had told me, I could be wrong, so don't fully quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure if you're on your phone at a stoplight, it doesn't count. Obviously, that's when we see most people doing it, and we have to honk at them because they won't go. But I think if the vehicle is not moving, it doesn't count, but I could be totally wrong.
Wow. So
I'd have to double check.
I know that you mentioned when this first came up, you didn't expect it to turn into what it did as far as like the things that you learned. And of course, there were a lot of surprising elements for me. But what else really stood out to you that was like, whoa?
I think just like how this law is written, like the specifics with the maps and the music, like you wouldn't expect people to be able to do those things, I guess, at first. But it makes sense why you're allowed to do those, because those are common uses while you're in the vehicle. I think the other thing is like there is really nothing currently to challenge that secondary violation. Same with the seatbelt violation. These are both things that could easily kill you or another person. And to know that there is a difference between a secondary violation and primary violation, unless you know someone in law enforcement, you're probably not going to know what that is. And so he said, you know, the biggest thing is like, be aware of those stories. There are so many people out there who have lost a loved one because of dangerous crashes, distracted driving. And he's like, you know, if you hear those stories, those are the things that are going to impact you the most. Or if it were to happen to you, unfortunately, he's like, it's really hard to get people to actually listen and be educated on this. But I think the biggest thing for me, I wouldn't want to be paying that ticket. It's like $150 for the first ticket, and then it just goes up from there. And I mean, just put your phone down. That's the biggest lesson out of all of this. And things can wait. And unfortunately, that's really hard for a lot of people. But he's like, you know, the more we educate, the more we learn to navigate these challenges, those numbers most likely will go up. But we'll see what happens for 2026. We'll have to check in next year.
And this here is just the story on our website, so you can get a better look at what the law says, as well as the numbers that were shared in the story. I know that they talked about wanting to use education as a way to prevent this, but are they also concerned that people, you know, are going to pick up on the fact that, hey, I won't be able to get in trouble for this if I'm riding clean?
Yeah, like if you use the excuse of like, oh, I was on my music or my maps. I think if you're committing those other violations, because something he had pointed out was, a lot of the times if we're on our phone and we're distracted driving or doing something, we're probably already committing another violation, whether that be speeding or swerving, going into other lanes without our blinker, those kinds of things. That's going to get you in more trouble than just a distracted driving hands-free violation. So really, that's why he says it's so important for people to be educated on this, because if you are committing those other violations, this just tacks on and ends up being a higher cost than what you would just see for maybe a speeding or a lane violation ticket.
And another thing that's interesting too, as I'm thinking about it, is, you know, if the cities and the municipalities aren't necessarily enforcing this, I mean, you only really would catch a trooper on the highway, on the interstate. So, you know, if you're not driving on the interstate that often, it's just like fair game, I guess.
Yeah, I know they are able to be out on like the city streets and they can enforce law wherever, but you're right. You mainly see them on highways and interstates. It's very rare. I know KCPD says they have been working with the state to try and make it to where they can enforce this law, but I don't think it's something that's like on their front to-do list. But I know it's something they have been working on from what they told me when I reached out about this, because I like reached out thinking like, oh, I'm gonna have all these numbers, and I was like, oh, I didn't know that. Like, I had no idea. So it's nice to understand that, but it's also, it definitely creates some sort of, not gap, but it creates a little bit of a tough spot for state troopers when it comes to trying to enforce that law and also educate people.
Yeah, I mean, it's the irony of it all. Law enforcement unable to enforce the law in a certain way. I can only imagine how frustrating that can be, especially when you see it, you know, because I know how it is for me as a driver. Very, very interesting. And I think that this will probably really enlighten a lot of people, whether they try to take advantage of it or, you know, just learning something new. I picked up a lot from this.
Yeah, and I'm sure as this law continues to be out there and they continue to enforce it and find ways around those challenges, they can always change the law too. And that was a big thing Justin had said. You know, while it is a secondary violation, it could always become a primary violation. Same thing with the seatbelt violation. They can't pull you over for not wearing your seatbelt unless you're committing another violation first. And so it's really just about, you know, either changing those laws or people trying to follow them as best they can. But that education, and then also just making sure that the laws are up to date best they can, that's really kind of their best chance at making sure that this gets enforced.
That makes me curious about other places. So like a quick anecdote. Years ago, my first job, I was a summer camp counselor, and my cousin, who was a police officer in Washington, D.C., she got me the job. And so she would take me to work with her in the morning before I had to go to work, and we would be in her squad car. And so one day she pulled up next to someone who did not have their seatbelt on and like gave them the signal, like, you need to put on your seatbelt. So I wonder if she would have been able to just pull them over, you know, could they enforce the law there? Or was she just, you know, kind of using her power to get the person in check? I don't know.
Like, hey, get your seatbelt
Yeah.
on. Well, yeah, obviously they have to be the example. They're law enforcement. They try to be for the most part. It depends on the state. I think some states do have it as more of a primary violation, or they can pull you over for just that.
Yeah.
But Missouri does not have that luxury.
Gosh. And so what do you hope that viewers will take from this story? I know our investigations get a lot of engagement.
Yeah.
People like to share their thoughts and opinions. But what do you hope that they will take from your reporting?
I hope everyone just learns something from this, because I learned a lot from it as a reporter. I mean, that's why I do this job. I don't just do it because I want to be on TV. I do it because I learn things, but I also love being able to tell other stories. And really this piece, so many people I talked to when we went to the DMV just to talk to drivers, nobody knew what this law was. And it's still, you know, they worked for 2 years to educate people on this, but a lot of people are just kind of in the unknown of knowing what those new laws are. And I think, if anything, hopefully people know that Missouri is a hands-free state. Be aware of that. And you could face a higher ticket because of it. But also, you could save lives by making sure that your phone is mounted, or understanding how that law actually works, what you can and can't do. I mean, I just hope people are able to take something away from it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you know, it can cause an issue in an instant if we're not careful. Did the trooper say at all just where we can go, or where they can go from here aside from education? Is there anything more that can be done to toughen up that enforcement, or is it just is what it is?
Yeah, I think it's definitely, like he said, training with like their law enforcement officers and their troopers, whether that be like how they address the law when they're out on the roads, or specifically with the legislature and having them maybe add provisions to this specific law. It is so new, so it can always change in the future. But really right now, I think they're still letting it just kind of be on the roads and see how it works and see what challenges they face. And then it could always change in a few years depending on if they see that there might be gaps, or maybe it is working well. It just really depends, because we don't have numbers to compare too much because of it only being enforced for 1 year.
Right. That's true. And again, you can find Samantha's story on our website, kctv5.com. And you can also watch it on our air as well. I know that it's going to be airing really soon. So thank you again for just taking us behind the story. This was really, really interesting, very informative, very educational.
Thanks, Taylor.